Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the African Esquire Show on WCC TV. I'm your host, Tierney Cherie. And today we're going to go through some news inside of the African world. So let's get started. So just an FYI, my voice is a little bit crackly as I'm under the weather. So I'm going to try to pound through this, but if you have to basically turn the volume up, feel free. But President Samia from Tanzania had a trip to the United States, which generated more than $1 billion in investments in Tanzania. President Samia Suluhu Hassan and U.S. Vice President, Kamala Harris met on Friday, April 15th at the White House in Washington, D.C., with the two leaders pledging strong ties for the two nations. But perhaps high on the agenda was the fact that the president's tour, which is her second to the U.S., has generated almost $1 billion in investments from various companies inside of the United States. Speaking at a briefing, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris said their talks mainly centered on Tanzania's economic growth. We welcome, of course, the attention you are giving to that and focus on the focus of this trip, including the focus of investment opportunities in relation to the economy and areas of tourism. She said that President Samia's trip to the U.S. has generated almost $1 billion in new investments from companies in the U.S. The investments, she said, will contribute to major economic growth to Tanzania, but in a way also contribute to the economic growth and jobs in the United States as well. So this is very much in keeping with what we have seen from the new president of Tanzania, Samia Suluhu Hassan. That is that she's not following the footsteps of Magufuli. Magufuli, we did not see him taking trips to the United States. We did not see him soliciting foreign investors inside of Tanzania. He was more locally focused. He was focused on Tanzania controlling the resources that were inside of its soil. Whereas President Samia Suluhu Hassan has many times shown that she's looking to corporatize and privatize many of Tanzania's resources. So this is in keeping with what we've seen from her so far. I'm not surprised to see this. But however, hopefully we can have people in Tanzania hold her to task, because she's not keeping in the spirit of President Magufuli, who was very much focused on using the resources really to local control over the resources, instead of just auctioning them off to different companies. In this case, this is going to benefit a lot of United States companies. So we'll definitely keep watching this story. Fox News amplifies a false narrative about racial justice protests leading to increased murder rates in 2020. This is according to News One. Ahead of the 2022 midterm elections, Fox News is trying to stoke fear of Black crime. Crime wave fear on its own hasn't quite had the desired impact, so why not amplify ridiculous claim that a spike in 2020 murder rate, the 2020 murder rate resulted from the Defund the Police protests. And that's what they've been saying a lot. If you look on just research the murder rate that has gone up, you'll see a lot that Fox News or other conservative outlets are pointing to the reason why these murder rates have gone up, attributing it to the Defund the Police movement, which I don't even think has actually actualized a lot of substantive laws, but apparently they're saying that this has driven a lot of police to leave their positions, and therefore the murder rate has gone up inside of Black neighborhoods. The thing about data is that numbers and statistics alone do not tell the full story. People can craft any narrative they choose by throwing some numbers and assumptions together. But just because there was a documented spike during a similar period as social justice protests doesn't mean the protest caused the increase. It's entirely possible that the same issues that drove people into the streets also manifested in other ways, like increased murder rates. Data from the Center for Disease Control showed that the murder rate increased by 30% between 2019 and 2020. And according to Pew Research Center, this represented the most significant single increase in several decades. While any increase is something to investigate, it's important to discuss those numbers in context. The murder rate increased from about 6 homicides per 100,000 to 7.8 homicides per 100,000. This also includes an increase in firearm-related deaths. An examination by Vox showed that while some violent crime like murder increased, crime rates decreased overall during the early part of the pandemic. The first few months of the pandemic in 2020 outpaced the first 2 years of the Great Recession in terms of job loss. Young workers had an unemployment rate of 25.3% in May 2020. This is according to News One. Their assessment is that high unemployment, limited activity due to public health murders, and other disparities do not alone explain the increase. That's because it's not a simple issue that can be put in a neat little box with a bow. Now, if you're based in the United States you live inside of a city with significant African population, you might have noticed that the murder rates have increased. I think all over the country they're increasing at astronomical rate at this current point, and it's very unfortunate. Obviously, any type of life loss it's just unfortunate. We can't take that for granted and just make this about statistics. These are people. Many times these are children. These are children that look just like you and I. So it's very much something that we have to take to heart, I think. As far as Fox News narrative, that it's the defund the police movement, I don't think that's it at all. First of all, that movement has not resonated the same inside of white liberal circles as it has inside of the Black community. You hear more about community policing coming out of the Black community, but you don't really hear defund the police as a phrase, circulating in our communities. The other thing, though, we should keep in mind is that it's pretty predictable that things were going to increase after the pandemic, when people were locked away and really society shut down. But the question is it increasing because of like mental health, stress from the pandemic, from different factors that came out of it, whether it's joblessness, whether it's just overall disenchantment with the society? Is it also possible that the fervor around all of the George Floyd protests may have led to this false sense of reality where many people thought things would get better? Remember how people were talking like this was going to be the end all be all, right? And it's crazy to think this is 2 years ago, George Floyd protest. Everyone thought that racism was not everyone, but a lot of people were talking like racism was coming to an end, that America finally has had this racial reckoning, and that everything was going to change. And here we are about 2 years later. Everything went back to normal, as can be expected anytime that things are basically a movement has people caught up inside of feeling more empathy for African people. Everything goes back to normal. This has happened many times in history. If you don't study the civil rights movement or different movements over time, you don't know that there were other times where people thought, this is it. Everything's going to change. This is going to be what has to happen for America to shift. Unfortunately, we don't study those, and we think we buy these narratives coming from the mainstream, and we believe in them. And I think a lot of times our belief inside of them are thinking that things will shift, or that even if we don't believe that white people will change, the belief that the African people in the community are going to just automatically organize around our betterment, and that doesn't happen, I think many times can lead to a lot of disenchantment with the system. So that's one possible alternative. But like I said, there could be a lot. It's one of those things that is hard to know. It's hard to pin down on one thing, but it does feel predictable that this is going to happen. And I think as much as we see a lot of economic strain on African people around the world, we're going to see a lot of similar acts of violence happen, because it's always going to be attributed to a cause. These things happen because of the society shifting and changing in a certain way that it becomes unlivable for some of us, and some of us resort to violence. So I'd love to hear your comments on that story, about your thoughts. Do you buy Fox News narrative? Do you buy this article's narrative that is more about unemployment? Or do you think it's something else? Why is the murder rate going up inside of African communities all over the nation? Now, do you all remember when Muhammadu Buhari was this bad guy for a very brief moment? We forgot that he has been so closely allied with the United States, and all of a sudden he was basically the face of the anti-SARS movement, the anti-police movement inside of Nigeria. He was the oppressive force that had to be taken out. Well, the United States has gotten over that, and they have approved arms sales to Nigeria after pausing over human rights concerns. So the U.S. has approved nearly $1 billion worth of weapons sales to Nigeria after lawmakers had put a hold on the deal over concerns about possible human rights abuses by the Nigerian government. In July, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House of Representatives Foreign Affairs Committee put a hold on the sale of 12 AH-1Z Cobra attack helicopters made by Bell, On Thursday, the State Department made the determination that it would approve the sale of the attack helicopters worth $997 million. This proposed sale will support the foreign policy goals and national security objectives of the United States by improving the security of a strategic partner in the sub-Saharan African country, a statement that was made about the sale. Now, this I think should just demonstrate to all of us that, first of all, nothing changed in Nigeria. Let's be very clear. Nothing changed systemically inside of Nigeria. There's still police abuses. There's still abuses by the military. There's still systemic injustice inside of Nigeria, as in all colonized societies. So nothing has changed, but rather people forgot. The narrative has died down. Many people are not talking about Nigerian police violence or violence against people, and many people have basically gone on to think about other things. Now, meanwhile, the United States basically notices that and says, okay, we can proceed with our relationship with them because essentially everything has died down. That should just let you know, basically, whenever they're talking about human rights abuses, first of all, they sell arms to way worse regimes, all the time, with worse human rights abuses than many of us can even fathom. And to tell you that human rights is really a code word. It's a code word meaning that our relationship with you is in the national interest of the United States or not in the national interest of the United States government. And whenever it's not, then you'll be labeled a human rights criminal, a human rights violator. Whenever it is, your human rights atrocities will be easily overlooked, as it is all the time in countries like Saudi Arabia or different countries that have done many things that they will speak against in some contexts, but not inside of other contexts. So it's always good to keep that in mind. Now, we've talked before on this channel about the UK and Rwanda having this relationship as far as immigration. Well, it's amplifying, and a lot of people are taking notice. So the UK to send asylum seekers to Rwanda under a controversial new deal. Critics slam the plan as unethical and unworkable, but President or Prime Minister Johnson says it will save lives and disrupt people smuggling. So the UK plans to send some asylum seekers who make it to the country thousands of miles away to Rwanda for their claims to be processed under a new controversial immigration scheme announced by Boris Johnson. Rwanda Foreign Minister Vincent Biruta said Kigali welcomed the partnership with London, adding it would offer asylum seekers and migrants legal pathways to residence in the country. But critics, including opposition politicians and refugee organizations, have warned that the plan is unethical, unworkable, and overly expensive. They have also raised concerns over Rwanda's human rights record. Now, Frank is going to go into detail on this story on Friday. I think it's just important to keep in mind in general that this is a prior relationship. This is something that has already been happening on a lower scale. And essentially, they're amping it up. And in fact, Boris Johnson had said that he thinks that this could lead to tens of thousands of migrants that are landed on beaches inside of the UK, basically being sent to Rwanda. So Frank's going to get into this, but of course, we also have to understand this is Paul Kagame's Rwanda, so he's agreed to this. So I hope you all are asking questions who support his country or what he does as to why he's supporting this agenda with the colonists, basically, to push people who are seeking asylum into Rwanda. And while we also see that there's definitely a hypocrisy when it comes to asylum seekers, and yet we see people being compliant with it whenever it's in their interest. So questions all to ask. Our last story is an update on Mali. So of course, Mali right now is in a lot of hot water because of their relationship with Russia. So a Malian army helicopter is said to have fired several shots close to British members of a UN peacekeeping force in the country. The incident was the first of its kind when between Mali, newly backed between Mali and its newly backed Russian forces and UN peacekeepers. We are aware of a recent incident in Mali in which rockets were fired by Malian army forces, helicopters close to a detachment of UK personnel as well. According to the diplomatic documents seen by AFP, the Malian army fired 6 rockets from its helicopter. The document says almost all Malian helicopters were flown by Russians, assisted by Malian co-pilots. It was also denounced by the United States and Deputy Ambassador to the UN as unacceptable incident that took place. So this is going to be commonplace really until until either two things happen. Until either Mali goes out of compliance or becomes more in compliant with the West, that is basically ending its relationship with Russia and reestablishing its relationship with France and the West, or until basically they are able to push for some type of regime change inside of Mali. That's really what I think they want to do. Now, right now, they're basically going for making Russia the scapegoat for what's happening in Mali. So it can't be that the people in Mali are rising up against Western imperialism or the colonial influence on their own. It has to be driven by some type of outsider because we can't think for ourselves. That's what they try to convince themselves of. And the Malayan people have basically denied that Russian mercenaries are overwhelmingly the ones that are doing certain attacks or whatnot inside of the country against different jihadist groups. They've been very adamant about that, yet the West has said they don't believe them, which is why they sent in these UN peacekeepers. The thing to keep in mind is that we're going to see a lot of these stories continue to come out because Mali basically right now has put themselves really in the spotlight for an African country that is not going to go in compliance with the West, but also an African country that's going to stand with Russia, even though right now the road has turned on Russia. And the more they do that, the more Mali becomes the scapegoat. So we should keep in mind that whether or not this story is true, it could be true, it could not be true, that the overall agenda right now of the West is that they're going to amplify any narrative that tears down Mali because Mali is not right now not in compliance with their system. And they're going to amplify any type of story that's going to link Mali's military to the Russian military because that goes with their narrative. Their narrative is that Russia has basically overrun Africa, has taken over the countries. That's why African countries are not going to back us at the UN, are not going to denounce Russia. Instead of focusing on whether or not that's true or not, a lot of people are just jumping on board because it's an easy explanation for why Africa is remaining neutral aside of the Russian and Ukraine conflict. That's all I have for today. Please do visit WeChargeColonialism.org if you want to subscribe to our newsletter. If you want to donate, you could go there. In addition, please also go to my Telegram group. If you want to get the articles that I am talking about right away, I post them to my Telegram group before I post them to YouTube. So you can go there. That's a decentralized app. You'll get notifications anytime that I post a video. So with that, I thank you all for watching, and please do like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video.
I think what we are suffering from is ideological confusion. That is, that we're not clear, we're not thinking clearly, and that we need a context within which to answer the question, is something good or bad? We assume that we have the same goals, but we never say what they are. It's time for us to think and articulate and establish our goals as Black nationalists and Pan-Africanists. We need vision, we need clarity. Otherwise, we can't answer the question, is it good for African people? Nationalist goal is self-determination. In the spirit of Delaney, Garvey, Malcolm, Amos, it is Pan-African commitment, that is the unity of African people worldwide and one Africa on the continent as a basis for African strength. So we are about building a Pan-African world order based on the principles of Ma'at, not in imitation of a European order. Ma'at as justice and truth. We need a nation concept, as Dr. Clark told us. A Black economic program, a cultural program, an independent political organization, independent Black media, independent African-centered education financed by us and controlled by us. All of this presupposes, very importantly, an African Black identity.